So coming back to your original question of that, people being able to look at, just because you're feeling it doesn't mean it's sacred, and that, your authenticity, and being, and that there's like coming up with a playing field. So we've got this pull to, we're feeling things, and we've never been told that what you're feeling isn't sacred. We've never gone, there's some things to look out for here. We've never been told that in our normal education, or having a series of elders telling us about the human condition. That's not something that was available to me. And then there's this authenticity that there's a difference between authenticity and what's just inside of you. So it looks like we're at the place of having people look at their inner world, and that there might be a choice here. What are we talking about? What would you...
Well, I think the realization that there is that choice is essential ultimately. I'm still stuck on the word you used earlier, which was sadness. When you described the sadness of not recognizing or you used that to describe that sense of wanting to do things in a particular way, or complete a checklist of how your life should look. Because I know that feeling. I've experienced that sadness of realizing that probably from childhood I've done so much to accomplish exactly that, of wanting that acceptance or approval or certain things that need to be done, and then getting to a point in my life where there was just a really deep sadness that I'd wasted so much time trying to create this particular way of being, which ultimately is just a mediocre cookie cutter, you described it, way of being, which is not authentic to who I am. It's not an authentic expression of self. And so there's definite sadness around realizing that. But until realizing that at a certain point, I was gung-ho, just trying to accomplish that. Not even realizing there was a choice. So it brings us to this point of, yes, realizing that there actually is a choice. But you have to access something first. You have to access some sense that there's more to you than just this...
some angst, maybe?
Yeah. Just a pinch?
Just a pinch of angst? Yeah, it's giving to... If what you're describing is resonating with anybody, that is being able to look at. Then the answer is what's authentic. What is my true expression? Am I following the rules and the list of things that I need to do to be approved by my world? Just out of curiosity, do you know what the motivating as you grew up? What happened for you that motivated you to be interested in that list? Do you know what that was?
And to figure out what that list is and how to accomplish it.
Yeah, well, the list of what people like. At some point, you got invested in the checklist of what the world wanted you to be. Do you have any recollection of how that got in place?
My sense of it is that it happened at a very early age. And that it was, as a child, I realized that there were certain things that I could do that would please my parents. And if I did that, the world seemed to be okay. I felt safe. And if I didn't do that, the world didn't feel safe. So I think it originally came from a sense of safety as a child.
Yes.
And I took that on, and then going through adolescence, there's a lot of insecurity around adolescence and that kind of thing. So I think it just amplified at that stage.
Okay, so the anxiety of adolescence, if your refuge was already finding out what you needed to do to be accepted, then you just applied thinking some more. Just in contrast, I'll talk about my as a kid is that I just did what I wanted to do, and I did what felt right to me. And the things that other people were doing and telling me, I'd listen to what people were saying. I was just like, well, It's not what I want to do. Why is that going to make me happy?
Okay, now how did you get to that? See, now that to me is fascinating because it is completely not my experience.
And it wasn't an easy road. You became a little bit of a lightning rod of hate a little bit, is that I had cousins that were their parents in particular, their mother was very strict. I mean, they had spelling bees at the dinner table. Seriously, during summer holidays, they had spelling bees. I went and stayed with them for a couple months when I was very young. And I couldn't believe, I couldn't spell my way out of a wet paper bag, and she was using it to actually measure how her children were better than my parents' children, specifically me. And I didn't really care about spelling bees, frankly. And
so what did you do with that situation?
I just kind of, there was a lot of anger and angst about how you needed to be. Like, it went to this degree. I remember I was setting the table. One of my jobs was setting the table, or this particular day. I don't remember if it was every day. And so I was going, it wasn't my family. And there was a fair number of people, so I was counting to myself about how many plates I needed to bring out. And so I'm like, 1, 2, and I'm kind of speaking out loud, but under my breath. And it was only her and I in the kitchen, and she, yelled at me, got in my face. And I remember seeing the little veins in her nose, and about that, if you can't say something out loud, don't say anything at all. Because I was counting to myself. It was so traumatizing and shocking that was actually an issue. I never had that in my life. So then I was like, got back, to myself after I kind of figured out what to do with the trauma and pushing that away. And then went, what am I doing? Oh, yes, figuring out how many people are sitting at the table. And I went, 1, 2. I did the whole thing all over again. She went bananas. She actually went bananas. So I just went, and it didn't make any sense to me. So that was really easy about the cookie cutter and how you were supposed to behave, as some of it was so nutty. And it just wasn't my parents were very much about, they let me be me, and and I had the experience of that I was loved for me, and that if I got punished, it wasn't because of me, it was because of my behaviors. And I'm not even sure they had that distinction, but I never felt that I was a bad person. I always felt I had done something bad, and I did a lot of bad. So I was always into something and doing something and breaking something and leaving the hose on outside where it would, for hours and hours on end, close to the house where it flooded our basement, went seeped through the cement wall. And being in Canada, everybody had a basement, so that was like things like that. Or mixing. I got in a lot of trouble. But it was adventure. Life was an adventure, and I was just following what was in my heart, and I just never got. People talk about when they had an experience where they had somebody put their thumb on them and they kind of broke them. I think is the experience that I had of that, is that, to different levels of how much they could handle trauma is what it seemed to be. So if they had very little trauma, and the gods in their life, their primary caregivers, were upset with them, all they had to do is a little bit upset, and they would crumble and then just start following the list of things they need to do. And then I hear stories of that people, had a sense of themselves, but somebody, usually a parent, would break them of, no, you're going to do what I want you to do. And then to varying degrees of creating a rebel. And I'm going to do, eventually when they get to teenagehood, and they're going to go, no, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to do the opposite of what you say, only because it's the opposite of what you say, which has its own downside.
Well, it's almost the same thing, isn't it?
It is almost the same thing. And then they become
still
rebels.
Reacting
still reacting, and it's still not coming from me.
It's still not an authentic expression of who you are.
Yeah. So that was me. I don't think most people are like me, but people think that would be easier. It's not easier. It's not easier just to do.
Why is it not easier? Because when I'm hearing that your parents accepted you for who you are, and that
I was fine at home.
Why doesn't?
I went to school. I had cousins. I went out in the world. Every time we had a family, outing, I was the one. All the other kids, I don't know what spider senses they had that I didn't. But, they would hear a parent coming down the hallway. It's like pandemonium. 15 cousins in a bedroom with 2 beds in it. And everybody else would stop moving and sit down. I have an actual memory of this. And then I'm standing on the bed. Everybody, they're all sitting down as this, particular auntie came in, which was the very, very strict one. And I'm the only one standing on a bed. 2 seconds ago, everybody else was doing, I don't know what actually happened there, but I don't know how they heard that, but I was the only one that didn't. So between not being aware of or caring about what the big people were doing, I guess, and really being designed to do what I wanted to do, just experiencing me. So what wasn't easy about it is that my whole life I haven't gone the way everybody else has gone, and that has consequences. People do look at you, and the more they know about your life, the more that they actually judge you and make you wrong. And if they have any kind of power in your life, they can make your life a little bit miserable as well, or any kind of pull whatsoever. So it actually has caused me to, create. I don't let everybody see, who I am or what's going on, or the decisions that I make. So I did learn to, if I'm going to be me, then then we have to put a little bit of there's just not full expression of that. I learned that.
Okay. I'm struggling a little bit with that because that sounds then that starts to become a little bit like my experience, where it feels like you need to. A
little bit. No, I just don't tell them. I don't act the way they want me to act. What I do is I just don't go, there's pieces of information you really don't need to know. And the reason why I'm saying this is there was a times in my life that I would just be me. I'd tell everybody everything, regardless of who they were. And that seemed to have consequences. I mean, it's just smart to not tell everybody in your life. I mean, you don't need to be at work. By the time I got to work, that was well established. But I think that's just social behaviors that are accepted. You don't need to tell everybody about, your entire life just because they asked. You don't really need to do that. There are consequences for that. I didn't start out there. I was very much, just me, and was willing to be me. And, so that I did get some equilibrium on that. I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy to be able to do that, as you imagine. So I think that being able to accept how much I did just say who I was and was what I was, I think is the interesting part. But it wasn't an easy life. If people think that sounds easier, it wasn't. It was not easier.
So a sense of, I'm just trying to refine this understanding of where that sense of what is authentic and what is not authentic, because so going back to my experience was to try and read the cues as accurately as possible. and become
good for
really,
you. I've heard about those cues.
Yeah, exactly. And I know those cues. I know those cues as well. Because you get to read them more and more and more, and you get subtle understandings of what those cues are.
Cues and how you should behave for this particular person or group or etc. I didn't invest. I was so busy going, what am I feeling in this situation? And what's going on for me? And being able to feel in the moment what I'm feeling and be able to respond authentically about what I was feeling. That didn't require cues. I wasn't interested. That wasn't, understanding the cues of what other people were doing was not part of that criteria.
Which means that you were more internally focused.
Yes.
Whereas my upbringing, I was more externally focused because I was reading external cues all the time, and then responding with, "This is what I feel I need to do in this situation."
You had more math to do than I did.
Yeah.
I got in more trouble than you did.
Yeah.
So I made all kinds of faux pas, and even to the day, I actually sometimes have to ask people, okay, what are the social cues in this situation? I don't ask it like that, but that's really what it comes down to often, because there's people around me that are really, really good at that, and also they had to learn to be dedicated to their own authenticity, and they have more of a balance, but they came from the side of, you don't need to really irritate a whole bunch of people by missing a whole bunch of very simple social cues, but I'm still not particularly dedicated to them. I'm probably a little bit more appropriate, but I still, to a degree, I've come to the place where I don't actually care that much. So I can be appropriate enough that I'm not upsetting people too often. That's neither here nor there type upsets. Like, you don't really need to say that type stuff.
There's still a discrepancy there. So I'm going back to what you said right in the beginning. That if you want to in a sense, you can look at the world that you experience. Your experience of the world is a reflection of what's happening internally. So, in a sense, if there was complete integration,
Yes.
I mean, this is what we're talking about.
Yes.
In a sense of, we sort of, in a way.
Yes.
So what I feel is we're looking at integration between the internal
Yes.
and external.
Yeah.
We're looking at our external reality reflecting as accurately as possible our
Yes.
internal, in a way that makes sense to us.
Yes.
So, surely, what we're talking about in an ideal situation would be that we are having reflected back to us very much an authentic expression of, or an expression of our authenticity as much as possible, right?
What we're getting by the people that we're interacting with, is that what you're saying?
Or our experience of the world generally would be, I mean, in an ideal situation.
My experience is an authentic experience of what's going on around me. I start there, for sure. But I don't necessarily...
Which means you have to deal with aspects, like the shadow aspects as well, because
Yes.
Because you have to include all of it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so there's
a specific part of the shadow that you're referring to. I need clarity on this.
You know what I mean by shadow?
No, what the discrepancy.
So, the discrepancy in the sense of that certain things would be appropriate to express and certain things are not appropriate to express.
Yes.
Understandably, in certain situations,
yes.
There's different levels of what's appropriate. But in terms of your experience of it, in terms of your experience of...
Not picking up those cues, yes, or not being interested in them as well.
If you are, like you've said now, if you are understanding your experience as an authentic expression or as an accurate reflection of what's happening, in order to engage with that properly, you would have to accept all of it, right?
What people are doing, like people's cues?
Cues, everything.
Yeah, so I might not see, because I do find it fairly all-encompassing. My feelings in any given moment, if I really truly want to know what I'm feeling in this moment, takes, pretty much all the bits that I have. I don't necessarily go taste the experience, go, okay, what are the cues and what's acceptable here, and then go back to feeling me. I do that maybe to a degree, actually, now. And I might have done it to a degree then. But I was more dedicated. It felt like there was so much work to do just to feel me accurately and work out my thoughts and work out my feelings and work out what my expression was, that I wasn't really looking at the social cues. I didn't have that.
Yes, but you obviously trusted what you were feeling.
I did trust what I was feeling, because I listened to what other people told me about how I should behave and what should go on, and I was going, that's a really bad idea. You don't look happy. You don't look particularly smart. Like even as a kid, I'm describing more of from a child to my 20s time in there mostly, because I think I've integrated a little bit since then, and it's probably not so all encompassing to feel what I'm feeling. I have it's a lot easier to be able to process all of that and quicker. So I think I'm more appropriate, but I'm still not entirely appropriate. I'm not always audience aware because I don't really care. I don't care enough to actually, now the people that I care about, or the ones that I figured out the ones that I care about the cueing to a degree, but I still am more interested in expressing myself. And I'll be contrary. Now, instead of just, pushing everybody's button and getting a whole bunch of upset that's really unnecessary, I might be more aware of what's going on there. I might not care. And I'll be more appropriate I'll say nothing if that's appropriate, or I'll actually start challenging people's views. I do that quite regularly. And I will do it in a nice way. I don't necessarily need to be upsetting people. But if I don't particularly like their views as well, I might not care about that either.
The way I'm hearing it is that it's not about looking at the external cues and then deciding whether or not to go with a particular behavior that will either please or displease. It's more about understanding what's authentic to you, and then with that realization or with that understanding, to then choose what to do in situations.
Yes, that's more of how it is now. But I was just thinking more, it's like when you're making these decisions, like more of the formative years and more of the beginning how to figure out how to express self. It was much more difficult then. So, but I was on the side of that. I almost had no, and I think it's a bit of a blessing for me actually. And ultimately, I guess it would have to be, since that's what I did. That I wasn't really, that interested in what the social cues were. I wasn't interested in, how you need to look and behave, and I was more interested in actually having the experience that really, what's making me excited right now? What's really, what am I interested in? What glows for me? And I went there and behaved that way and did that. And in my family, you were accepted. I had an opinion as a child. As long as I didn't abuse it and, I wasn't being whiny or just thinking about myself. But our family made group decisions about almost everything. And then they go, oh, what do you think? Well, I'd say, even as a kid, about vacations and what we were going to do and where we were going to go and what we wanted to do today and that kind of stuff. And I felt my opinion had value. And a lot of times it didn't, but plenty of the times it did. I knew intrinsically who I was okay. I was accepted, and what my needs and values and ideas were had a place.
Okay, so all of that you've just said now, I mean, you felt accepted.
Yes.
Your needs and values had a
deep
place.
sense of acceptance.
A deep sense of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the things you're describing are things that not everyone feels.
I've come to that conclusion. I didn't know that for a fairly long time, that most people felt by their family that they didn't feel accepted, that they didn't feel that, included, that there was a way they needed to be. It was dramatic. And my brother, the interesting thing is that my brother and I have an older brother, he has a very different experience. So I'm really wondering how much of that was my parents and how much of that was also me. A very large part of it was my parents. But he had a different experience. He felt judged. I don't think he was more of a rebel. He felt more of that he was being told what to do. So I don't know if they really changed their behaviors that much with me, or I don't know.
Well, you just had a very different experience, because there's obviously certain things about your particular experience that allowed you to develop in that way. What do you think it was that? What's the essence or the spark or the drive that allowed you to experience your parents in that way, or upbringing in that way, and to develop?
I felt loved and accepted. That was good enough for me. And then I think I had a dedication to feeling what I was feeling. I didn't even understand, the upset that, like as a little kid, I had a lot of upset and ways that you're supposed to behave as a kid, and I just didn't do that. I was noisy. I ran around like a crazy person. I was, and kids are usually getting in trouble when they're laughing. When they're having fun and, experiencing and screaming and doing all the stuff they're doing, they're generally having fun. And I got chastised a lot for that, and I was usually either a ringleader or the loudest one in the bunch, and it never really stopped me. I don't know why. It never really factored that much for me.
Because for a lot of kids, this is exactly, their experience is that, I mean, they can be happy now, they can be ecstatic, then they can be sad, then they can be crying about something, then they can be this. And so they move through emotions. They're not attached to them. They're moving through and flowing through different emotions.
They were fluid for me, yeah.
And very fluid. And they're experiencing what they're experiencing, and they're reacting. They it's all encompassing. If something happens now, you're completely upset, you're overwhelmed. Then you're happy. Then you're this. But somehow you get trained out of that, because in a sense it becomes that certain things are okay to express and certain things are not okay to express. Certain things are acceptable, so other things are not acceptable. And so things start to become divided up into categories, and there's certain avenues of expression are shut down and other ones are encouraged. You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
as you grow up, you start to, and then of course those things that are shut down start to move more into the shadow.
Yes.
In a sense that those are not acceptable, so you pull those back, you hide those away, you don't express those, and they build up, as part of the shadow. And so it seems that for most kids, that would be more the experience. For most people now, most adults would have a sense of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. That it probably comes from childhood. And so a lot of that content in the shadow has no place to go. It can, well, it's not. You know, as a kid,
it's submerged.
It's exactly, and so and if it's not owned, then it can only be expressed in the world.
Yes.
And so people's experience of the world is a lot of that shadow.
Yes, yes.
But it's a lot of what they're not willing to own within themselves.
You know, what got beaten.
Exactly. So coming back to what we were saying about the external being a reflection of the internal.
Yes.
If you have to accept that as an expression of everything and all the parts of yourself.
Yes.
Then you're having to accept all of that as part of yourself.
You're talking about the shadow parts now.
It may be part of the shadow, especially the stuff you look externally and you don't see. The stuff is difficult to own.
Yeah. It's, you know, but it's so interesting is that you're a kid. You have virtually no self-reflection ability whatsoever. So much is happening for you for the first time, and that you really don't have. You're not mature enough to, or had enough experience to be able to do anything with that, and that it's so formative for, you know, what it is that we're, you know, what the rest of our life, you know, the shape of the rest of our life. How that occurs is it's not easy to actually do that at all. So, you know, what's the I guess we're only really dealing with individuals that have come to that place, and that they've come to some kind of angst, and that they're asking some kind of question, and they're looking for, you know, there's some kind of anxiety, there's some kind of feeling about that something needs to be different here. I want to they have a sense of self, I guess. And that anxiety is pointing to, and there's maybe a little bit of a crisis, is that I need to do this life that I'm doing. There's a saying about when our ego brings us down to our knees, is that when we're doing things, you know, the way we were operating and we've done it for so long, it starts to pile up after a while, and it forces us to actually look at something's not right, something's not, you know, good here, something's not making me happy. I really don't think people really look that deeply unless there is that anxiety, you know, and it's significant enough that they're going, no, something's got to be happier than this.
Well, you know, there's the opportunity there for a big shift to happen, because probably up until that point, someone's been invested in changing the circumstances around them, changing other people. You know, manipulating a situation to get a particular outcome, this kind of thing. There's that certain point where something happens and you think, okay, well, maybe there's something I can change with myself. Maybe there's something I can do differently. Maybe there's something internal, something about me that's generating all of this.
Yes.
And that's where I need to look.
What gets like in your case? What actually had you do that? Like. That time, I think, in life is a really important time when that anxiety builds, and I think that there's usually, if it's a real powerful change, it's usually to the same size of a crisis that somebody has. So what actually had you look? I'm assuming that you had a time like that in your life.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, I somehow managed to to sustain that type of situation of because ultimately you're not just pleasing your parents. As you grow up, your parents are less significant.
Yes.
It just gets transferred onto the entire world.
Yeah.
So
relationships, work, everything. Social,
all relationships,
inner circle, and the rest of the world.
And obviously the more significant the relationship, the more need to please
okay, yes,
so
yes.
It becomes
in varying degrees, yes.
Yeah. And I think it just, like you're saying, accumulated and accumulated and accumulated, because eventually it becomes impossible to read all the cues and to respond appropriate or respond in a way that pleases everybody all the time.
Yeah.
It's just an impossible situation.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, you should know that. I should know that. Everyone should know. It's an impossible situation. It cannot be done.
Yeah.
But I tried.
Yeah.
And I nearly broke myself in the process.
Yeah.
Because it's maybe, someone said it to me quite a while back, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but they said, the way you're operating now is you're like a thermometer thermostat that's governing the temperature or something, and you set to different temperatures.
Yes.
Eventually, it has to break.
Yes.
Because it cannot be set to different temperatures. You can drive yourself crazy trying to be at all those different temperatures.
If there's one person in the room, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
But the more people that are in the room that you care about,
yeah.
then that's when you're going to break.
Yeah.
Is that you're going to be so fragmented is what it's going to come down to. Because what you're going to experience in the world is based on who you're going to see yourself as, is going to be all the cueing that you're getting, and that you're going to be a little bit of this character and a little bit of that character and a little bit. It'd be really confusing about what self is. It would be that you're constantly actually having to, and you get so good at it. It would be like a second, it would be your first way of being, that you're just constantly going, taste a little bit of that, feel where they are, know what they want, and then be able to provide that for them. And that it would be your investment in who you are is that it'd be very difficult, because the better at that you got, and the more unconscious that it was that it would become, the more fragmented you'd be, and it would be just so difficult to actually really have a real solid experience of self. And it couldn't be particularly satisfying at some level. And then, like you said, the breaking point when that thermometer actually breaks.
Yeah, but even then I didn't realize
that's
exactly
what
it was.
Yeah.
And my solution was still to try and fix things externally. So I thought, well, the solution is to isolate myself.
Yeah. Well, of course.
So, which is a way of bypassing the entire issue.
Well, yeah.
So,
but if the problem is that you have to cue yourself, to get a sense of self, you actually have to eliminate the cues. Because you didn't even have the insight, and you're transformational and have been for a very long time. You understand the inner world, and this was hidden from you for a fairly long amount of time, with all of your understanding, training, and inclination. Look at what other people are dealing with, because the interesting point is that you had no idea that was your operating mechanism of what you were doing, and that you couldn't see it directly and see it for what it was and make the choices about it. When we make whatever choice that we make quite early on about how we're going to our modus operandi, is that we get good at it and we don't question that. That's
well, this is exactly it. Even though people had actually mentioned this to me before,
yeah,
and they'd observed it, and I just, no, that's the way I am. That's just what I do. It's almost going back to what we were saying in the beginning. It's almost like that, because that's my pattern. Seeing it as, well, that's part of who I am.
Yeah, this feels right to me. But that's exactly the words you just said. Something I almost jumped out of my skin when you said that's just who I am. That's what people say when you're asking them about. My experience is that when people start talking about, this is who I am, it's just part of me. You're attacking me. Why do you want me to change? I've actually had people say, and people fairly close to me, is you're trying to change me. I'm not trying to change you. I'm trying to reflect something back to you about that. There's some things that you're saying and doing that is coming from somewhere, and I actually, I want to reflect to you that there's a possibility that this is fear-based, and it might not be in your best interest, and it might not even be who you are. And there is a modus operandi that you can understand, and then make some choices about all of this stuff if it's working for you. And the patent answer that I get is, no, this is just who I am. This is sometimes this is a part of me, but more often than not that it's me. And why would you want to? It's kind of like they're not questioning the ropes of the ring. They're just going, no, these are the ropes of the ring, and I'm going with this, and that you're interfering. You're actually interfering and judging me, and this is, and there's a rejection of that thought process. That is probably my most common response to any kind of reflections like this, is that it's somewhat not showing up as an opportunity.
So maybe this is why you asked me earlier why that phrase stuck in my mind. And maybe it's got something to do with this now.
Well, yeah.
In a sense that I could go through so many years of just isolating or fencing off a certain area of operating and just saying, well, that's the way I am.
Yeah.
And not questioning it, not looking, I mean, there obviously were reasons it was too painful, or just not visible at that point, or I wasn't ready to look at it. It's too much. But what I was saying was basically, well, that's just the way I operate. So I was using that as a way of, in a sense, not not questioning that this could be a pattern that comes from somewhere that was developed, it's almost like you feel that that's so intrinsically part of your personality and your modus operandi that it feels like it's too difficult to change, because you almost won't recognize yourself if you don't have that.
That's what I was going to say. Is people? It's the same as the ego and the inner dialogue. Is everybody we're so used to listening to that little voice in our head talking to us. Sometimes we're thinking, sometimes we're being thought, and people, because they're so used to it, they actually associate that to themselves. They feel a loss. They feel. So they're really not, this is me. I don't even think most people go, this would be too difficult to change. People are going, change? That is me. I mean, what do you mean change? Now this so feels like me. And you're suggesting I need to change something that's me. You're just like everybody else. It's just trying to change me.
And now we get to the fear.
Uh-huh.
Because if I don't have this, then who am I?
Yes.
If you take this away from me,
empty.
This is who I am.
Yes.
Then, so there isn't... See, to be able to actually look at those kind of fundamental changes, actually investigate them with the potential that this could change and this could be released, means that there has to be some sense of self beyond this.
That would be true. There would actually, but there seems to be two things. Is there has to be some, but people's modus of operandi about how they function in being accepted and accepting themselves and how they look at the world